my lore-loving weirdo friends. And yeah, actually right now I am considering all of you my friends because as it turns out, I fucking cannot with humans right now. So welcome back to Lore Play. I'm Dana Pereira, back, refreshed, and as cynical as ever after taking a week off that I did not ask permission for. What's that phrase though? It's like, better to ask forgiveness than permission. Honestly, if I would have known that I was going to take the week off, I would have mentioned it in the last episode. But, it was a surprise for me too. Life be lifing, and I just kind of decided my brain needed to go on spring break. So I did. Because I like myself, and I listen to my body when it's telling me something. Especially when it's telling me to open a bottle of wine, or 3. Anyways, I know it was incredibly difficult for you to live without me for a whole 7 days. So please forgive me. But we back, baby, with a vengeance. Because this week's story is fucking wild. And fittingly, we're gonna head out together on spring break. We all know that Europe and the US have been fucked since existence. But this week, we get to travel to Brazil. And spoiler, it is also fucked. It's the late 1700s in Rio de Janeiro. The streets are unpaved and muddy. The city smells exactly as terrible as you are imagining. Noblemen swanning around in their fancy clothes. Enslaved people everywhere. Because it is Brazil, and this is a brutal period of history. There are also sex workers, murderers, sorcerers, and at least one woman who, depending on who you ask, was either a tragic figure destroyed by a society that gave women absolutely no options, or an actual serial killer who bathed in the blood of babies. Or, and I say this with all seriousness, just maybe both things can be true at the same time. Today's episode is the story of Bárbara dos Prazeres, which translates to Barbara of the Pleasures. Now, she's also known by another name too, the Witch of the Arch of Teles. She haunts one of the oldest surviving archways in Rio de Janeiro to this day. She was a real woman, or at least mostly real, in the way that folklore always has some real woman at its center who gets mythologized into something monstrous by the people who feared her. But before we meet Barbara, I need to give you the setting. Rio de Janeiro in the late 1700s was the capital of colonial Brazil under Portuguese rule. And by 1763, it had officially been named the capital of the entire state of Brazil, which is a very fancy way of saying it was the most important city in the colony. Gold and diamonds had been discovered in the interior region, and all that wealth was flowing through Rio on its way to Portugal. So Rio was a boomin'. It was also deeply stratified. The Portuguese colonial elite were at the top, obviously. Below them were free people of mixed race. And below them were the enslaved Africans, who made up a significant chunk of the population. By around 1799, Rio had about 43,000 people, and roughly a third of them were enslaved. For women specifically, colonial Brazilian society was an absolute maze of limitations. If you were a respectable married woman of the elite class, you were basically kept indoors. You were property, more or less, your husband's legal ward. If you were poor, you had almost no employment options. The church ran things, morality was policed publicly and aggressively, and for women who fell outside the prescribed roles, who were widowed, abandoned, disgraced, or simply not willing to play by the rules, the consequences were swift and brutal. The one place a woman with no family, no husband, and no money could sometimes survive? The streets. Sex work. which in the 1790s in Rio was not glamorous, let me tell you. Not that it's glamorous now, but, the hygiene options are significantly better. Now, into this world, Barbara. She was Portuguese, born around 1761, though the exact date is lost to history, which, honestly, so on brand for a woman who spent most of her life being ignored by official record keepers until she became inconveniently terrifying. Around 1779, when she was approximately 18 years old, Barbara arrived in Rio de Janeiro with her husband, described in the records variously as a nobleman named Antonio de Orbia. Now, here is where things get a little juicy, because why did they leave Portugal? Well, in version 1, Barbara was fleeing accusations that she had poisoned her own sister in Portugal, which, wow, to be a fly on the wall in that family dynamic. This is exactly why I think it's 100% okay to divorce your family. In version 2, the marriage itself was a cover. Barbara had allegedly been having an affair with a powerful nobleman back in Lisbon, and the entire relocation to Brazil was arranged to quietly make that inconvenience go away. The husband apparently knew and agreed to this, which is either incredibly progressive or incredibly depressing, depending on how you look at it. Either way, possible poisoner, possible kept mistress, definitely someone the Portuguese establishment wanted on another continent. Barbara and her husband get on a boat and sail to Rio de Janeiro. And for a minute, things are actually going well for her. Barbara was, by all accounts, strikingly beautiful. And in colonial Rio, that was currency. The couple quickly became embedded in the upper-class social scene, partly through her husband's connections and partly through Barbara's looks, which apparently attracted the attention of some very important people, including the Viceroy himself. She was admired. She was desired. She was moving through the elite circles of one of the most important cities in the Portuguese Empire. And then she met someone that she really liked. Now, here's where Barbara's story starts to diverge hard from the path expected of her. In a city rigidly organized by race and class, Barbara, respectable Portuguese noblewoman, wife of a fidalgo, fell in love with a man described in sources as a free black man. His name is not recorded. He was free, which in the context of Rio in 1790 is significant. He was not enslaved, but he was absolutely not someone a woman in Barbara's social position was supposed to be associating with, let alone falling in love with. And yet, here she was, a total smitten kitten. What is a married woman to do when she falls in love with someone else? The only obvious path to her everlasting happiness is to do the murder on him, right? Right. So that's what she did. She killed her husband. She allegedly stabbed him while he slept. Objectively terrible, I know. But I also want you to understand, in this society, for a woman to leave a marriage, there was essentially no mechanism to do so. Divorce did not exist in any meaningful sense. You could not just say, okay, I want a different life now, bye. Your husband owned you. Your husband's family owned you. The church had opinions. The law had opinions. All of those opinions pointed in the same direction, which was, you are property, sit down, shut up, look pretty. So when Barbara decided she wanted out, the options were limited. Technically she did say till death do us part. She just, helped it along a little bit quicker. Did she choose the correct option? Absolutely not. But are we surprised someone in that position ended up at murder? I mean, I'm not surprised. Anyway, husband is dead. The authorities apparently did not officially charge her. The death may have been ruled an accident. Like, yes, officer, he tripped and fell on his own knife. How tragic for him. And in some retellings, the police actually look for a scapegoat. Whatever happened, she was not prosecuted. She goes to her lover, and they live happily ever. Wait, no fairy tale ending here. She did the murder on the last guy, and this douche canoe thought it smart to start cheating on her and spending her money. Well, play stupid games, win stupid prizes, and all that. So she killed him too. Also, reportedly stabbed. I mean, I guess she's consistent. As far as I know, there's no consequence for this murder either. Nobody charged, nobody checking into it, nothing. After the second murder, Barbara was approximately 20 years old. She had no husband, no protector, not that it sounds like she needs one, no family nearby, no more money, and no legal right to most forms of employment that would have sustained her. Also, and I'm speculating here, she has one dead husband that perished suspiciously, and then she was with her lover, whom society at that time would not approve of. She was tarnished. In colonial Brazilian society, a young woman with no male guardian was essentially invisible to the system in every way except as a target. But she did have one last asset that could help her: her looks. And so, Barbara became a sex worker. For roughly the next 20 years, Barbara worked as a sex worker in Rio. She was apparently quite successful at least initially. The sources describe her clientele as men of the middle and upper classes. She was known to charge a pretty penny for her services. And she also reportedly traveled at some point following the Brazilian military. It was common for sex workers to follow armies. You gotta get where the getting's good. And, I mean, what's better than a bunch of men traveling in packs away from their families that are scared, lonely, and horny? It was during this period that she picked up the nickname that would define the rest of her legend. She lived and worked in the vicinity of the Arco de Teles, the Arch of Teles, in the center of colonial Rio. In Barbara's time, set into the arch or the wall of the alley nearby, there was a small devotional image, a representation of Nossa Senhora dos Prazeres, Our Lady of the Pleasures. This was a title for the Virgin Mary. Barbara adopted this image as her protector. She prayed to her. She identified with her. And so, partly after the saint and partly in reference to the nature of her work, she became known as Bárbara dos Prazeres, Barbara of the Pleasures. There's something genuinely interesting here, by the way. This woman who killed 2, possibly 3 people and was surviving by any means necessary, who had been rejected by her church and her society, still found a way to identify with the Virgin Mary. She just identified with the one named of the Pleasures, which, I think says everything about Barbara as a person. Now, let me tell you about the Arch of Teles, because it matters. When it was first built in the 1740s, it was actually quite grand. The Teles family was one of the most powerful in Rio. They essentially had a monopoly on certain judicial offices in the city for generations. Their arch connected the main square, which was the center of colonial power, to the narrow, bustling lanes of commercial Rio. It was a prestige address. But in 1790, right around the time Barbara was settling into the city, there was a major fire. The building above and around the arch was badly damaged. Important civic documents were lost. The area began to decline. The noble families moved elsewhere, and the alley, under and behind the arch, became what all such places become when the wealthy abandon them, a refuge for those with nowhere else to go. By the time Barbara was living there, the area around the arch was, by the accounts of the era, a gathering place for sex workers, beggars, and the sick. It was a place of ruin and misery. The arch itself stood as kind of a threshold between the respectable square on one side and the dark, cramped cobblestone lane on the other. I want you to picture it. A stone arch, a narrow alley, a small glowing image of the Virgin Mary in the shadows. And Barbara, getting older, still working the only trade available to her, under the watchful eye of Our Lady of the Pleasures. It's honestly a little poetic in a fucking terrible way. So time, as it does, did its thing to Barbara. She got older, and she got sick. Some accounts say she contracted smallpox, and smallpox in the early 19th century, if you survived it, left survivors scarred, in some cases severely disfigured. Barbara survived, but was badly scarred. She kept working, and then she contracted something worse. Leprosy. Leprosy was one of the most feared diseases in the world, and for good reason. In 19th century Brazil, it was effectively a death sentence, not just physically, but socially. Sufferers were isolated, shunned, often cast out of their communities entirely. For Barbara, who already had nothing, no husband, no family, no social standing, leprosy was the end of the road in every sense. The disease caused her body to visibly deteriorate. The accounts, written some decades after the fact, describe it with brutal specificity. Swollen ears, thickened lips, exposed gums, a face that had become, in their words, strange and ferocious. This is where she acquired her second nickname, Barbara Onça. Barbara the Jaguar, or literally Barbara the Wildcat, which actually kind of sounds like a 1950s cheerleader, but she was far from it. She lost her clients. She lost her income. And shockingly, nobody had a kink back then for a gum job from a leper. Weird. So she became a beggar. And she became, by all accounts, obsessed with getting her youth back. And yet again, we find ourselves in that in-between space of history and legend where a woman obsessed with youth and beauty does the unthinkable to keep it. The records from the early 1820s in Rio document a period of alarm about disappearing children, specifically infants taken from or near a central charitable institution of Rio, a hospital and orphanage, an all-purpose refuge for the poor and sick. Now, what the legend says is considerably more dark and dramatic. So let me introduce you to the Wheel of the Abandoned. This was a real thing, and it was one of the most haunting institutions in colonial Brazilian history. The wheel was a cylindrical wooden mechanism built into the wall of the institution. Think of it like a revolving door, but for babies. You approached the wall from the outside. You placed a baby in the opening, and you rang a bell. The cylinder rotated 180 degrees, taking the baby inside the institution, where nuns would receive the child. The whole system was designed to be anonymous. The person abandoning the baby couldn't see the person receiving it, and the person receiving the baby couldn't see who was leaving it. No names, no faces, no questions asked. From 1738, when it was established in Rio, Until 1888, a full 150 years, tens of thousands of children, some reports even saying as many as 47,000, were left in this device, like a fucking baby drop box. The nuns would take in the infant, register it in a ledger, name it after the saint of the day, and arrange for a wet nurse to care for it. The system was designed to prevent baby homicide. The idea was, if you had nowhere to turn, if your baby was the product of an affair, or if you were enslaved and wanted your child to be raised free, if you were simply too poor or too sick, here was an option that did not require you to leave your baby in a river. According to the legend, Barbara, desperate to cure her leprosy and restore her youth, consulted sorcerers and healers. First, she tried animal blood, because, you have to crawl before you can run. She bathed in the blood of dogs, cats, goats, and other animals. She ingested snake meat, frogs, lizards. She was reportedly instructed to whip herself with specific herbs from the mangrove, plants believed to have curative properties in the rituals she was participating in. None of it worked. Clearly, they haven't heard of the wonders of salmon sperm facials yet. So, obviously, she's gonna have to up her game. Because, shockingly, bathing in dog blood did not cure leprosy. I know, just cannot believe it didn't work. So the sorcerers allegedly told her what would work: the blood of newborns. And how unoriginal history. An older woman bathing in the blood of children to restore her youth. It's one of the oldest misogynistic tropes in the book. You've heard versions of it. Elizabeth Bathory, the countless witch stories across European folklore, the old crone who preys on children, the fallen woman who turns to evil when her looks fade. This narrative existed before Barbara, and it will exist after her. When societies want to demonize a woman who fell outside acceptable roles, this is often the story they reach for. Does that mean it definitely didn't happen? No. The police records do document missing children in Rio in the late 1820s. They do document Barbara as a person of interest, known to authorities with a history of violent crime. Something was happening. Does the legend around her perfectly reflect reality? Also, no. It's messy. History is messy. People are messy. Stabbing people is messy. It's all messy. The legend says that Barbara, driven by desperation and the conviction planted by the sorcerers, began to haunt the Wheel of the Abandoned. She knew about the wheel, everybody in Rio did, and she knew that the babies placed in the wheel were, in theory, anonymous and left in the dark of night before the nuns could get to them. The legend says she would wait in the shadows near the wall. She would listen for the sound of a baby crying or the creaking of the wheel's mechanism. And when she heard it, she would take off like a bat out of hell trying to snatch the newborn before the nuns could take it inside. Then she would carry the baby to the mangrove, the swampy, dark wetlands at the edge of the city. And there, according to the legend, she would perform her ritual, binding the child, cutting, bathing in the blood. I mean, it is genuinely horrifying, the image of it. Imagine if there was a whole file with accusations of her hurting children. People would be ready to behead her and burn her at the stake back then. But now they'd probably just elect her president. The nuns started to notice. The number of babies being left in the wheel dropped dramatically during this period, some saying it fell to less than half of normal. The police were alerted. They apparently tried to find her. They apparently could not catch her. And that's it. That's the legend. That's the end. Nobody knows when Barbara died. Nobody knows where she is buried. Nobody knows how many people, if any, she actually killed. She just disappears from the record. And Barbara may have disappeared, but the legend didn't disappear with her. The Arch of Teles still stands today. If you visit Rio and you want to step back into colonial Brazil, this is one of the few places you can actually do it. Beautiful colonial architecture, cobblestone streets, the arch framing the narrow alley lined with bars and restaurants. It is a genuinely lovely spot now. Lively, tourists and locals mixing, happy hour crowds spilling into the lanes, the smell of food, the sound of music. The hills are alive. Just kidding. And according to local legend, on moonless nights, after everyone has gone home and the streets are silent, you can hear a laugh echoing through the darkness under the arch. Barbara's laugh. Reports of heavy booted footsteps following people through the alley with no visible source, and the faint sounds of infants crying. Some people say she actually still lives today. All that baby blood kept her youthful and thriving. Some say that there was a body found floating in a river in 1830 that matched her description. And some say that she changed her name and she now resides in a white house with a tiny-handed orange rapist and pedophile. Okay, nobody is saying that, but I did want to put it on the table as a viable option. And that is the story of Bárbara dos Prazeres, or Barbara of the Pleasures. We have no fucking clue if she did anything wrong at all ever, but we still turned her into a monster because history loves to demonize a woman any chance it gets. Maybe she deserved it. Maybe she didn't. But either way, she wants you to send this episode to 10 friends, or she will suck your baby's blood. So, you better get on that. Also, if you're in the LA area on June 13th and 14th, come see me at HorrorCon. There will be merch, and there will be a booth for recording your own spooky shit with a chance of it being featured on the show. Tickets go on sale in April. I think it's like the 13th or something, so I'll keep you posted on that. But it would be cool to see some of you there. And until next time, unfriendly reminder that we have a real-life monster that actually hurt kids in the White House. So no need to make up lores about women. The monsters already exist.